Right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining this breakout room today. We're going to talk about Regenified and how we can hopefully connect the food that you're growing on your farms to the markets out there, why that's important, what problems it's solving. And before we do that, I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. So my name's Richard Tufton. I live in Austin, Texas now. But as you can maybe tell from my weird accent, I'm from England originally. I've been in Texas for about 9 years, but have managed to resist taking on the local accent so far. But I come from about 15 or so years experience in the beef slaughterhouse world in the UK. So I studied agriculture at college and then basically learned from a grassroots level how the whole slaughter operation works by doing all of the jobs. So buying the cattle and the sheep, learning how they get slaughtered, how they get cut up, boxed, sent off to supermarkets, butchers' shops, restaurants. And in the UK, there's definitely still quite a lively high street butchers market. And that's where you often go to get real connections with farmers. And it helped teach me the importance of getting that connection, that emotional connection with the food that you're buying from a meat point of view. There's also a steakhouse which is now over in New York and Chicago called Hawksmoor, which I helped set up in terms of the sourcing, finding the best cattle and sheep to go to that steakhouse. So if you're in Manhattan or if you're in Chicago, let me know and you should go and check out Hawksmoor. It's really good. Anyway, the big reason which got me over here to the States was Whole Foods. So I was in the right place at the right time back in about 2006 when Whole Foods came over to the UK, and it got me the opportunity to meet the Whole Foods team who are based in Austin and help them work out which farms and farmers to take products from for their London stores, which then expanded to other parts of the UK. But through that, I built up a connection with Austin. And then my now wife, I met her in London and she was also from Texas. So it was a kind of meeting of all of those different pathways. But there were some big inspirations which took me on this journey. I don't know if you know the author Mark Schatzker on the left there. He's a Canadian guy who wrote this amazing book called Steak, and the premise of which was he would go eat steak in all of the main countries around the world and then trace back where that meat came from and really look into why did it taste the way it did when he ate it. He's also written an amazing book called The Dorito Effect, which talks about the difference between real food and then flavors and how everything is designed in an ultra-processed world to really confuse you as a human. And anyway, he's a super inspirational person for me. But in that book, Steak, there was a chapter where he went to Peter Luger's steakhouse in New York and he traced the meat back to where it came from. And it was from a feedlot in Texas. And as a London boy, I had no idea what a feedlot was. And just hearing his description of the visceral experience of a feedlot for the first time, how it smelled and tasted to him as he was approaching it, was really shocking to me, but also really eye-opening, and made me want to come over here and try to make a small difference in how we eat beef in this country. And it also introduced me to Alan Williams. Dr. Alan Williams, one of the co-founders of Regenified, is featured in that book too. Temple Grandin, I'm sure every one of you know who she is, but an amazing human being, a rock star woman in a male-dominated meat industry who made global impact and was a big reason why the welfare has improved globally for animals that we enjoy the meat from. And in conjunction with all the work that we're doing now with this regenerative movement, she's a very important person in my life and in all of our lives, actually. And then finally, Gabe Brown, the other co-founder of Regenified. I discovered Dirt to Soil, his book. I'm sure, like many of you, found it very inspirational, and I was brave enough one day to give him a cold call, and a few months later, here I am working as his vice president for supply chain for Pastured Proteins, thanks to Salah Shimrani, who's the CEO of Regenified. So what's the problem which we're all trying to solve? Well, a lot of it's been covered today already, but obviously there's a lot of press about higher and higher carbon emissions. Climate change is without doubt a real thing. You look at these photos here, you've got the Dust Bowl in the top right there from Texas in 1935, and then as recently as 2022 there in Phoenix, Arizona, something very similar coming through. My friends here at Hickory Nut Gap in North Carolina, this was just a couple of months ago, they got washed out. This is one of their pigs being rescued from the flood. And then one of my friends sent me this photo from Dubai, which is in the middle of the desert, and he was actually quite excited this day because he was able to get out his water skis and get towed around by a 4x4, which is insane, but that's in the middle of the desert. So climate change is definitely happening. You've got soil erosion. The average age of farmers is getting older and older. It's something around that 65 years old mark right now. And I was just having a conversation at lunch here today. I know too many farmers' sons and daughters who have simply no interest in getting back into this industry because they see mum and dad working every single day of the year and not making much money and rarely going on vacation, and we need to do something about that and make farming more interesting and more resilient and more profitable. And hopefully we're going to help, at least in some small way, to contribute positively towards that. And then obviously, as Ray referred to in his talk earlier, there's the declining human health and the life expectancy because we're no longer eating proper food. We're eating food-like substances too much, and regenerative agriculture is definitely one of the answers to that problem. And then obviously the lower populations of birds and bugs and bees, which we can all experience if we go out into some of the farms out there today. So think about, from a point of view of a consumer, and I always think of the person who's standing in the shopping aisle deciding which products to put into their shopping cart. And for something like beef, everybody thinks, I took this video in Uruguay, I was there this summer, everybody thinks this is where cattle come from, this is how they're all raised. And for every single animal out there, this is how they start their life. That's true for 2/3 of their life. But then they come to a fork in the road and they can end up in a feedlot, such as the one on the left there, or they can go to a grass-fed, grass-finished system like this. This is Brown's Ranch, Gabe's place up in Bismarck, North Dakota. That's actually a feedlot in Colorado, which is how a lot of beef obviously is finished in this country. The thing that's really interesting is that the cattle in the picture on the left in the video, they're actually organic cattle. So a consumer would see an organic sticker on them. Nothing wrong with that, but they're fed organic grains and corns. It's a GAP 1 feedlot, meaning that it passes the mark for GAP 1 for Whole Foods. So you could go into a Whole Foods meat counter and get a GAP 1 organic steak, and it'd be coming from the feedlot on the left there. And for me, that's interesting, because if I was to take my wife to that feedlot on the left, she's not in the industry, she would definitely not be wanting to eat meat from that situation. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but certainly there are pros and cons to both systems. One of the big aims of Regenified is to try to provide truth and traceability so that a consumer will start to really understand the choices that they're making in the stores. This graph is pretty small for you to read the text, but basically, the food industry, especially the livestock world, we're at this kind of fork in the road where we can be painted as the bad guy or the good guy in terms of climate change. Certainly, cattle and livestock are responsible for quite a high percentage of emissions globally. But what is, I think, really exciting and where the biggest opportunity is that 95% of the impact of animals happens on the farm. This right here is showing a life cycle analysis. So you can take an animal from birth all the way through to that meat being eaten at home somewhere, and you can work out the impact all of those stages of that process has. And the green and the brown all the way up to here, this is all happening on the farm. And that last little section, that looks at things like, is the packaging recyclable, and what was the transport like getting it to the from the slaughterhouse to the supermarket. But the point being, we've got a huge opportunity to make a gigantic impact, because 95% of it, you guys are in control of that. And that provides a really big opportunity to make a big difference. So globally, locally, we're at this really extraordinary intersection right now where, from the most zoomed out level, you've got governments at COP events making commitments to global temperature caps and what they're going to do as a country. Then you've got boardrooms, every single boardroom across the world, especially in the food systems, are being asked, is your business sustainable? I guarantee if you're a fly on the wall in that board meeting in Kroger or H-E-B or Wegmans or Publix, any of those guys, they're all being asked this question, if their business is sustainable or not. And then you've got this groundswell of demand as consumers are starting to understand better the differences between food and how different foods are produced. And a lot of that is thanks to Gabe. I mean, Kiss the Ground did amazing things on Netflix. Common Ground, the follow-up to that, is currently in cinemas right now, doing really well. His book, Dirt to Soil. You've got Roots So Deep, the Peter Bick documentary, which is excellent. And so that's creating the demand, but there's also a lot of confusion in the middle, and that's what Regenified, we're hoping to help fix that confusion and make more of a straight line path from farmers like yourselves who are making a really positive impact and joining you up with consumers and customers who want this type of product. We were talking about this last night at dinner quite a lot, but I've definitely wasted quite a few years of my career trying to push stuff through a supply chain, and that just is not how it works. A chain, by definition, works by pulling, right? And so this idea of regenerative agriculture taking over the world is great, but it has to be led by a consumer demand. And for that to happen, consumers have to understand what it is that they're buying, and they have to understand the stories and the narrative of all the things that you guys are out there doing. And that's a big driver for Regenified, to try to ground everything in truth and traceability, to help you guys really tell your story and protect your narrative from any kind of greenwashing. So what exactly is Regenified? How do we help you with these challenges? Well, we'll come onto your farm once per year, and we'll do 65 data. We'll get 65 data points per field, per farm. And Gabe often says you can't manage what you don't know, right? So what we're doing is we're giving you a lot more information about your farm, hopefully, than you've had access to before. And with that information, that will help you become a better farmer of sunshine, of rainfall, of air, and become gradually less reliant on some of the expensive man-made inputs that have become part of our farming system. So Regenified itself, we were founded a few years ago by farmers, and that's what kind of makes us unique in this space, that Doug Peterson, Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, they're all farmers, and this system is designed to benefit you, the farmer. We've been lucky enough to get USDA recognition, FSIS recognition, which basically means it's very easy for brands to put our certification stamp on the product on shelf, because that's what we're here to do, to try to enable you to support and feed the growing demand for this kind of product. So why does certification matter? Well, the average consumer has got about 2 to 7 seconds to make a decision when they're reading the pack. So this is a typical consumer. She's got flowers, she's got an obedient daughter, everything's happy. This is how shopping works, right? Or does it? This is more the scene. I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I'm sure we've all been there, where you've got 0.5 seconds to make decisions on everything in the store because you've got some pretty unhappy campers who definitely don't want to be there. So the point of certification is that we're trying to provide something easy for the consumer to understand, that they can look at the product of rice, of bread, of milk, of meat, whatever it is. They'll see that certification. They'll know, okay, I understand the system that comes from. That's the goal. That's what we're aiming to get towards. But that's why certification matters. We need consumers to be able to trust the product that they're putting in their shopping cart. So we're doing that with our certification mark, which is a mark of confidence to the consumer, so that with time they'll start to understand that this stands for nutrient density, it stands for water quality, it stands for fighting climate change, for advancing biodiversity, all of those things. This is where we're up to right now. So here in the US, we've got about 1.5 million acres that we've verified to date. We're actually international as well. We go across 11 countries right now. So examples of verifications that we've done not on home soil would be avocados down in Peru. There are coffee growers in Guatemala. We've got people growing olives in Greece for olive oil. But the products all are sold here in US and US supermarkets. Some cool things that have happened in the last year. Whole Foods have approved Regenified as one of their certification marks. So if you want to sell your product in a Whole Foods store and you want to talk about regenerative, you want to talk about sustainability, then Whole Foods want you to have a Regenified stamp on your product for that to happen. And kind of what I was saying before about this groundswell of demand, we've seen regenerative sales, so sales of products that are regeneratively certified, go up about 20% year on year. The premium for those products tends to be in the region of 10 to 35% right now. But what's really interesting, I haven't put this up on the slide here, but 5 years ago, there was a poll and 6% of people knew what regenerative agriculture was. And now we did the same poll within the last 6 months, and that figure's up to 45%. So people are really starting to understand from a consumer point of view. Again, think back to this shopper who's not a farmer, they're just wanting to feed their kids. They're starting to at least understand what that word means. And so it's about taking them to that next step to match that up with the product that's on the shelf. So how does it actually work? If you want to get your farm verified, it's all about the 6-3-4. So the 6 principles of soil health, 3 rules of adaptive stewardship, and the 4 ecosystem processes. Now, I'm not going to go into that in too much detail because probably you all kind of know what a lot of those things are. It's things like having living roots in the soil all year round, having cover crops, not tilling. Livestock is not essential, but it's definitely encouraged as cattle will be the catalyst in helping to build that soil health. But what we do on our annual visit is we'll come and we'll do all of these lists of tests. So we'll go into the soil to 15 centimeters and 30 centimeters depth, and we'll do the Haney test, we'll do the PLFA test. We'll start to give you information on your soil so you can see what's actually happening. We'll look at the water infiltration rates. So we'll be able to work out how much rainwater you're able to infiltrate into your land. Obviously it's important how much rain is falling on your land, but the bigger factor is how much you're able to soak in versus it going sideways into the rivers and streams. We'll also help you understand the diversity, what you've got growing above the ground, all the different species of grass you might have in your pastures. And then we'll look at the wildlife levels, the bugs, the birds, the bees. So we'll give you a whole picture of what each of your fields is like. Now, it's only in small at the bottom of the slide, but nutrient density testing is something that we can also offer, which in my view is going to be the game changer, which will start to take this mainstream. If consumers can understand how much more nutrient density is available from a product that has been grown regeneratively, we're going to start to make a big difference, because they will understand that language. The thing which makes Regenified unique in this space is that we're not a bar that you have to get over. It's not either a yes or no. Think of it more like an on-ramp. It's really important for us to meet farmers where you are. So it doesn't really matter if you're a little bit regenerative or if you've been doing it for 20 years like Gabe Brown. We have this tiered system. So every 3 years, when we come back to verify, we want you to be one step better than you were from 3 years before. But as long as you're tier 2 or better, then the products that you're growing will be able to get the verification stamp. So we do have a few farmers that came in at a tier 1, which means that they're on their journey, but they're not yet able to have the stamp on the products that they're selling. But it's actually very easy to progress. We have guys that have gone from tier 2 to tier 4 in a year. It's all about looking at the practices on your farm and the outcomes that you're achieving. But that's how it works. If you're tier 2 or greater, the products that you're selling can have the certification stamp. So I talked a bit about the nutrient density. This is an example of one of our beef farmers. And so we did 3 samples. We did a conventional beef sample, we did a grass-fed, grass-finished sample, and then we did the regenerative grass-fed, grass-finished sample. Phytochemicals, without getting too sciencey, they're basically, the more phytochemicals in food, the more flavor that food has. And so you want it to be as high as possible. So if you look at the conventional average, is down here, the grass-fed and the certified regenerative at the top. So you're about 2.5, 2.7 times higher than conventional, which means the eating experience that you will get from having a steak or a burger from certified Regenified meat is going to be considerably greater. And why is that? Because healthy soil grows healthy grass, and then the cattle are eating that grass, and then those cattle become the healthy food. And that line of health goes all the way through those things. And the healthier the food is, the higher it is in things like antioxidants, and it will become a preventative medicine. And it will be something that consumers will look for as they start to understand this language. I think the thing which is kind of cool about the way that Regenified is set up is that we're aiming to set up kind of like an a la carte menu. So each farm that we verify, we're able to produce a farmer passport like this one, which will have all the stats of that farm. Now, some of these things the farmer will care about more than anybody else, like looking at things like water capacity and biodiversity. Some of these things the supermarket buyer will care about because they'll be under pressure to write their Scope 3 ESG reports, which basically is about how much impact they are having. But then there are going to be things on here that the consumer will start to connect with, such as the phytonutrients. So this crop farmer up in Saskatchewan in Canada got a 45% higher phytonutrient level on this particular crop from that year. So it forms something which will talk to all the different stages of that supply chain, because remember, it's got to be a pull. You've got to produce something that's appealing to all of the stakeholders involved in the journey of that food, from the farm all the way through to the person eventually consuming that meat. And by focusing on the practices and the outcomes, you can form this menu which will appeal to all of those stakeholders. So where are we right now in our kind of supply-demand equation? We're probably short about 500 head of cattle, finished cattle, before the end of this year. Next year, we're going to be short about 5,000 head of cattle, something like that. And that's just from us going out into the marketplace and seeing what consumers want to buy. And then now we're going to be trying to match that up with farmers like you who hopefully have products like this that we can talk to and start partnerships with and verify your farm. The bison world is really progressing quickly right now, so we're looking for about 1,000 head of bison. And we've got an ongoing need for crops: corn, soybeans, malted barley, wheat, oats. I haven't put up on there. If it comes from soil, we're definitely interested because the demand is there and we're building out that infrastructure to try to support the supply that all of you guys are doing. So if you're a farmer and you're growing any of these things, we definitely want to talk to you to see if this is interesting to you, if you want to get your farm verified, because the market is definitely ready to be buying products that you're producing. Before I finish, I just wanted to introduce Johnny Hunter, who's sitting at the back there, who's one of our verified rice producers. And I just thought it might be interesting for you guys to hear from him what his experience was as a farmer. I haven't paid him or told him what to say, so he's free to say whatever he wants. But I thought it might be interesting for you guys to hear from a farmer who's gone through this process to, I mean, Johnny, do you want to say a little bit about your business, and then maybe we can take some questions?
Well, let's get one thing straight. He hasn't paid me yet. Real quick, how many producers in this breakout session? Is everybody already doing regenerative in the breakout? Anybody not doing regenerative yet? It's okay. So I think Richard did a great job of kind of giving you an overview. From the producer perspective, I'm Johnny Hunter. I'm CEO of Castro. We're incorporated. We're landowners. We're farmers. We have our own brand of rice that we take out into grocery retail, food service, and B2B. We have our own rice mill, our own packaging line, our own trucking company. So we're a vertically integrated, family-owned ag business. We made a transition to what we call regenerative agriculture in 2013. And so we had been in this a minute. I've been aware of Regenified for a couple of years. I needed another certification, like I needed a hole in my head. So I was not super excited to go through the process. I thought it was silly to have to pay somebody to tell me that I'm doing the things that I know that I'm doing. But that comes from my personality. I'm, got issues like everybody, but that's definitely a big one. What Regenified really does is, on that consumer side, yeah, there's a whole conversation to be had about that. But I think what this room needs to know is that on the commercial side, the B2B side, with your maybe off-takers that you're working with today, they're interested in these things. And they're paying premiums for it. For me, yes, everything Richard said about here's the problem that we're solving in terms of the global climate and soil health. But hey, the problem that we need to solve is that farmers are going broke. And regenerative agriculture helps us fix that. And Regenified helps the world know that you're doing this thing that you say you're doing. And that's kind of long and short of it. Going through the process, I was dreading it. It wasn't that bad. I have a team around me that did a lot of the heavy lifting, but I did spend 2 days in the field with Doug Peterson, pulling all the samples, doing all the things. So it's a lift, but I will tell you that, the world does look differently at operations that go to this level to prove, the practice. So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny.